If fame was like a mirror, then Jane Fonda is one of the few women who looked into its deepest cracks, even when those cracks showed her own hidden pain. To millions of people, she's a living legend with fierce beauty, amazing talent, and a rebel, the spirit that never gave up. Eyes like fire, a body built like steel, and a presence that swept across movie screens like a storm dot. She amazed the world touched the nation's heart during wartime with Coming Home, and later changed the daily lives of countless families through her famous workout videos. But behind the camera, away from the bright lights, stood a woman quietly carrying pain that no movie script could ever fix. And behind all the love and harsh criticism, what truths has Jane Fonda kept secret all these years? Do you remember the first time Jane Fonda came into your life through a movie scene, a line, or maybe just a look in her eyes? Now, come with us as we peel away the layers of glamour to open the final door. The one that leads to a Jane Fonda the world has never really seen before the world ever knew her name. Jane Fonda was just a lonely little girl in a house that looked amazing on the outside, but left her soul hungry inside. Born into the glittering world of Hollywood, she lived under the huge shadow of her father, Henry Fonda, a movie legend loved by millions. But to Jane, he was a distant figure, unreachable, unknowable. Her mother, Frances, was a gentle door that quietly closed way too soon. Her father gave no praise, no hugs, and allowed no weakness. Love, if it existed at all, came wrapped in cold corrections and endless silence. And Jane, far too young to understand the weight of needing approval, learned an early, harsh truth. If she wasn't perfect, thin enough, quiet enough, obedient enough, she might disappear completely from his sight. But nothing could have prepared her for the wound that would split her life in two. At just 12 years old, Jane lost her mother, Frances, in a mental hospital. The family told her it was heart failure. No one explained, no one cried. There was no room for sadness. Her mother's photos disappeared from the walls. Her name was never spoken again. It was like she had never existed. Then, weeks later, in a moment as cruel as it was unforgettable, Jane stumbled upon the truth. Alone at school, flipping through a magazine, a single sentence, cold and harsh, hit her like a knife. Her mother had killed herself. Not from her father's mouth, not in the arms of family, but from the cold words on a stranger's page. That moment didn't just break Jane. It erased what was left of her childhood. The night before, she hadn't gone downstairs to say goodnight. And in the fragile heart of a grieving child, that missed moment became a life sentence. Guilt, unreasonable, but unshakable, took root in her chest like a thorn buried deep. For years, she secretly believed that if she had only said goodbye, her mother might still be alive. Her father did not hold her, did not comfort her. He simply moved forward as if nothing had happened. And so Jane did too. But inside, the crack grew wider. She stopped hoping, stopped asking. She turned herself into a fortress. Perfect, cold, untouchable. She didn't rebel. She performed. She didn't cry. She endured. She didn't scream. She disappeared behind walls of iron discipline. And when the world later praised her beauty, her talent, her fire, they never saw the silent scream that had driven it all. The desperate, aching need of a child who only wanted to feel worthy of love. Jane Fonda didn't rise because of luck. She rose to survive. Because the merciless silence of her childhood had taught her one unspoken truth. If she didn't become extraordinary, she too might be erased from this world. Just like her mother. In the dazzling glare of 1960s Hollywood, where perfection was enforced like a law, a young Jane Fonda was quietly falling apart beneath the tyranny of being perfect. In her 20s, loved by the world, her face blazing across glossy magazine covers. Yet inside, she was a haunted cathedral of silence, shame, and invisible wounds. She was no ordinary starlet, but a goddess of Hollywood's cruel fairy tale, dressed in velvet privilege, lit by camera flashes, yet unseen, unheard, untouched in the ways that mattered most. Born to movie royalty, she was raised among legends, but never truly held. Her father, Henry Fonda, immortal on screen, was ice at home. Praise was limited, affection nearly gone, and his eyes looked at her, not for beauty, but for flaws. If she wasn't thin enough, quiet enough, perfect enough, she feared she would vanish into the background of his indifference. Fame didn't dissolve that belief. It made it harder. Cameras loved her, but Jane hated herself. Behind every red carpet smile, she fought a losing battle. Secretly, she battled bulimia, binging and throwing up, hidden beneath designer clothes and headlines. Nobody knew. She looked like the world's ideal, but Jane couldn't even face her reflection. I hated my body, she confessed later. If I could just fix it, maybe the rest of me wouldn't feel so broken. Hollywood didn't heal, it made the wound deeper. Studio executives, drunk on profit and fantasy, often dressed cruelty as advice. One even suggested she break her jaw and remove teeth to make her face thinner. It wasn't a joke, it was Hollywood logic, and Jane, still craving approval, listened. She went through plastic surgery, not out of ego, but desperation. Each procedure was a plea for worthiness, a stab at erasing doubt. Yet the mirror was never satisfied. No matter how perfect she looked, the girl inside remained bruised. Those 20s years, the ones everyone romanticizes, were hollowed by shame, loneliness, and the weight of pretending to be okay. She projected poise, elegance, fearlessness. But in her own words, she never believed she'd see 30. That's how deep the pain went. The world saw a rising star. They missed the collapse happening just off camera. Behind the polished image stood a woman fighting to survive herself, shattered by the need to be loved, hollowed out by a world that worshipped only the surface. And though future years would bring reinvention and fierce advocacy, the scars from that era never truly faded. She was no longer the daughter of Henry Fonda. Jane had become a force forged in fire, a razor-sharp mind, an unyielding will, and a spirit bold enough to defy the very system that once tried to mold her into a compliant doll. Her real breakthrough didn't come from glamour, but from a kind of pain that burned to the bone in They Shoot Horses, Don't They, 1969, where she played a dancer worn down by life itself. It wasn't acting. It was a muffled scream from a soul on the verge of collapse. Every glance cut like a blade. Every gesture trembled with despair. The world saw it then. She no longer performed to please, but to strip away illusion. Then came Clue to 1971, a role that could have fallen into cliché. But Jane transformed the call girl into a survivor. A woman reduced to her body, but never robbed of her soul. That first Oscar wasn't a career milestone, it was a declaration of rebirth. And in Coming Home 1978, she brought a softness so raw it left audiences breathless. As a woman caring for a paralyzed veteran, every tear was real, lived, not acted. Her second Oscar wasn't just a prize, it was a reckoning. Jane had begun choosing roles not for glory, but for meaning. Tired of hollow scripts chasing money, she co-founded her own production company. An audacious, nearly reckless move for a woman of her time. But through it, she reclaimed what she had always been denied: control. She began telling stories about war, justice, feminism, not to soothe, but to confront. Coming Home didn't just move hearts, it forced America to face its buried wounds. To Jane, film wasn't a place to hide, it was a battlefield for truth. And she held that conviction to the bitter end, even when it cost her roles, income, and favor in Hollywood. In a world addicted to illusion, Jane chose truth, from Oscar podiums to anti-war protests, from film sets to congressional hearings. She didn't just act, she questioned, challenged, and turned art into a weapon. Her career wasn't a resume, it was a manifesto. Her legacy wasn't built on fame, but on courage. Jane Fonda never chased the spotlight, she turned it into a torch, lighting the way for others. After enduring fame and trauma, Jane Fonda encountered a moment that would define her, not on any film set, but in a land far from home. By the early 1970s, she had outgrown her glamorous screen image, weighed down by inner turmoil and public expectation. She found herself pulled toward deeper questions of purpose and compassion. Driven by empathy, she began listening to stories from those touched by conflict: students, families, veterans. Then in 1972, she traveled abroad to witness war's aftermath firsthand, visiting hospitals, schools, and communities scarred by hardship. What she saw moved her deeply. Resilience despite loss, grace despite grief. She asked, listened, absorbed suffering beyond headlines. But in one moment, a photo taken at a military site, while she sat awkwardly smiling, she became Hanoi Jane, a symbol of national outrage. That night, alone in a hotel room, she stared at the phone for hours, unable to dial, suffocating in shame. I had to learn to apologize with my whole heart, she later said, not just for mistakes, but for the choices she made, believing they served a greater cause. She did not mother with ease. She mothered with trembling hope, with guilt that lingered like smoke in every room she entered. But healing came slowly through conversation, through tears that no crowd ever saw, through the fragile rebuilding of trust, not owed. but offered. Her foundation for at-risk teens in Georgia wasn't about philanthropy. It was a whisper of repentance, a vow to help lost children find what she never had: grounding, grace, and someone who stayed. Vanessa and Troy, in their resilience, gave her something no award ever could: the quiet permission to fail and still be worthy of love. Jane Fonda's legacy will stretch across screens and speeches, but its truest imprint lives in what her children carried forward. Not the image of a perfect mother, but the truth of a woman who never stopped trying to become one, even after touching the heights of fame, surviving broken marriages, and becoming a resilient mother. Jane Fonda's most brutal battle wasn't fought on a movie set or under the public eye. It was waged quietly inside her own body. At 72, breast cancer struck like a cruel warning. Before she could fully recover, skin cancer came in 2019, and by 84, fate knocked again with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. The once iconic body, once a symbol of beauty and strength, had become an unrelenting battlefield. She faced chemotherapy with the courage of a soldier, making her journey public as if to say, "If I can get through this, so can you." But beyond the fading lights were sterile hospital rooms where the hum of 4 machines replaced applause. There were silent nights where the woman once adored by the world faced a loneliness that had no name. She once confessed, "I'm not afraid of dying, but I'm afraid of leaving with regrets." And those regrets lingered. Birthdays missed, hugs left halfway, phone calls forever on hold, because duty and ideals always came before love. Time had ceased to be her ally. Her memory faded, her spine bent, and every step became a battle. For someone who had redefined beauty through grace and strength, learning to accept fragility was a bitter trial. She had wealth, fame, and a legacy admired by millions. But in the still of night, none of that could hold her hand. No cameras, no spotlight, only a fragile breath and an unyielding will. When she emerged from treatment, thinner, quieter, but still smiling, Jane Fonda left the world with a message that could never be forgotten: that true beauty lies not in youth or perfection, but in the strength to rise after every fall. Her greatest legacy wasn't the trophies or political victories, but how she chose to live wholeheartedly, courageously, and with deep human dignity, even in the face of time's final unraveling. At 87, Jane Fonda no longer lives in fame's glare, but in serene purpose. Her Los Angeles home has become a sanctuary of nature, books, and reflection. She measures legacy not in awards or headlines, but in lives mentored, healed relationships, and presence restored with her children. Though she acknowledged her past absence, today Vanessa and Troy share dinners, laughter, and vulnerability, building honesty from patience and humility. Romance no longer defines her. Since 2017, she has embraced solitude as liberation. But perhaps Jane's most profound reconciliation came with her father. On the set of On Golden Pond, 1981, a single unscripted moment rings forever. Henry Fonda's tears in response to Jane's forgiveness, that quiet redemption spoken too late, sealed what cameras could never capture: a daughter finally seen and a woman made whole. Beyond personal healing, Jane harnessed her financial freedom, built across best-selling ventures, and purpose-led investments to fund causes she deeply believes in, from youth support to climate justice. Even into her 80s, despite multiple cancer battles, she maintained daily discipline and mind-body care, showing that her strength does not resist aging, it honors it. Now with silver hair and a steady gaze, she speaks of death with peaceful clarity. And the only thing she fears is departing life with regret. Jane Fonda's greatest legacy doesn't rest in fame or fortune. It lives in resilience, grace, and the courage to keep rising. So after journeying through Jane Fonda's life, what has moved you most? Share your thoughts below. Rate her legacy from 1 to 10. And like and subscribe for more stories of Hollywood's most tenacious icons. The image, though innocent, sparked harsh backlash, ruined her public opportunities, and tested her resolve. Jane later expressed regret, not for seeking truth, but for how the photo was interpreted. She understood its pain for many, and acknowledged it with humility. Rather than retreat, she doubled down on healing through art, through empathy, through storytelling. In Coming Home, 1978, which she produced and starred in, Jane portrayed a woman caring for a wounded Vietnam vet, not for spectacle, but for truth. That film earned her another Oscar and transformed how the world saw her, not as a celebrity, but as someone with a conscience. Though controversy lingered, Jane never lost her heart. She knew that doing what's right can be misunderstood. The moment could tarnish a reputation, but it could never erase a life devoted to truth. In that silence and in the long journey back, she discovered lasting strength that did not rely on approval and a voice that grew louder in service of empathy and justice. Following the storm of public scandal and private anguish, one might expect peace for Jane Fonda. But her most challenging trials awaited in the twists of her personal life. Over decades, she endured 3 marriages, each exposing new depths of yearning, vulnerability, and an unspoken ache for unconditional love. Her first marriage to French filmmaker Roger Vadim began in 1965, when Jane was 27, young, unsteady, and yearning for stability in a world demanding perfection. Vadim, almost 10 years older, famous for passionate affairs with Hollywood icons, became the spark that ignited Jane's public persona. She learned to embrace a sensuality once feared. Barbarella transformed her into an international symbol of allure. Yet, behind that glow, the darkness grew. When their daughter Vanessa was born in 1968, Jane stepped into motherhood full of hope, but quickly felt torn between her public image and private self. She wanted to be both, but felt she failed at each. Vadim pushed her into roles, flaunting her body. Jane craved substance, characters with heart, purpose, pain. Their conflicts spilled over. Values, ambitions, identity clashed, and guilt gnawed at her maternal soul. Jane later confessed she often felt like a photograph in Vanessa's life, always pictured, rarely present, at the peak of acclaim and beauty. She felt empty, disconnected, uncertain if she was living or merely performing. Their marriage unraveled as ambitions diverged. Vadim sought spectacle. Jane sought meaning. In 1973, she left, not just a husband, but a life that demanded too much and still left her unseen. Taking Vanessa, she chose authenticity over illusion. But that decision carried its own weight. Motherhood did not quiet her doubts. It magnified them. She felt bold, yet broken, free yet unworthy. For all her applause and glamour, at her core, Jane Fonda remained a woman searching for love without conditions. Walking away from Vadim did more than end a marriage. It marked the beginning of a lifelong journey toward herself. No sooner had she escaped the image Roger Vadim crafted than Jane Fonda entered a new chapter. This time beside a man whose battles were fought not on film sets, but on protest lines. Tom Hayden. His name burned with political fire, and to Jane, symbolized more than romance. It was redemption. At 35, shaped by loss, fame, and silent fights, Jane found in Tom not merely a partner, but a cause, a belief, an ideology she could hold when the lights went out. Yet, she did not expect the quiet war within the public revolutionary clashing with the private mother. When their son Troy was born in 1973, Jane hoped motherhood would ground her. Instead, it fractured her. Tom expected a partner who could support campaigns and nurture a perfect home. Jane tried. She marched, fundraised, and soothed her child to sleep, but nothing felt whole. I didn't know how to be a mother, she later admitted. Love felt conditional. Even parenting became a prison of perfection. She sacrificed sleep for strategy meetings, raced home from speeches to make up for missed stories. Guilt never faded. She longed to be unbreakable at rallies and tender at bedtime, an impossible ideal. Behind their shared activism, the cracks grew. Jane began to feel Tom saw her more as a symbol, a beautiful, powerful icon rather than his equal. They worked for nonprofits, and real change couldn't fill the emotional distance in their marriage. The void she had known in childhood returned, now dressed in marital duty. Moments with Troy slipped away. Mornings missed, tears unheard, guilt digested alone. Though her activism amplified marginalized voices, her child often grew in the echo of her absence. By their 1990 divorce, Jane was acknowledged as a cultural force, but at a personal cost. I loved my children, but I was never sure I was enough for them, she confessed. Jane did not regret her causes, but mourned the intimate terrain she never learned to navigate. Her marriage with Tom Hayden wasn't a collapse of passion, but a reckoning between public power and private sacrifice, and from that silence emerged her hardest journey, learning to forgive herself. After 2 marriages that had once burned with conviction, but crumbled under the quiet weight of unmet needs, Jane Fonda stepped into her third, not with illusions, but with exhaustion disguised as hope. In 1991, at 53, she married media titan Ted Turner, a man of vision, empire, and unpredictable warmth. To the world they were invincible, hosts of galas, owners of sprawling ranches. Their love splashed across magazine covers, But behind those photographs was a woman slowly disappearing. Ted never demanded she changed, yet he never paused long enough to see the woman still burning beneath the surface. He loved her presence, her elegance, her grace, but not the storms she had weathered, nor the questions she still carried. In time, Jane found herself performing a part once more, not on screen, but in her own home. She laughed on cue, smiled at crowds, stood beside him like an emblem. But when the cameras were gone, she sat in silence, aching. As the children grew, and the house echoed differently, Jane faced a quiet reckoning. She had become invisible inside, a life that seemed perfect, no betrayal, no cruelty, just a slow erosion of self. And in that gentle unraveling, she saw it clear. Even tenderness, if not rooted in truth, can become a gilded prison. So in 2001, she left, not in fury, not in flight, but in mourning for the woman she had abandoned to keep the peace. In a house grown cold, Jane Fonda chose, perhaps for the first time, not to be someone's muse, someone's mirror, or someone's crown. She chose to be hers. And in doing so, she wrote the quietest, bravest chapter of her life. A love story without a partner, but not without love. Through 3 marriages and countless reinventions, Jane Fonda's greatest role, the one that exposed her deepest fears and longings, was not played on camera, but in the quiet, sacred, and often fractured space of motherhood. To the world, she was a legend. To her children, she feared she was a ghost. She remembered holding baby Vanessa for the first time, how the room fell away and time stopped. But in the years that followed, the camera stole more of her than she ever intended. She vowed not to pass on the cold perfectionism she had inherited, yet found herself repeating the patterns, working too late, leaving too often, loving too quietly. With Troy, she felt both awe and heartbreak. He was steady where she was scattered, present where she had vanished. She missed too many birthdays, too many bedtimes, once forgetting to call on his big day because she was lost in the logistics of a political fundraiser.